One of the things that I really loved in working with dogs over the years is when I trained detector dogs and worked on the sheriff's department. I don't know why, everybody has their own little part of dog training that they really love. Detector dog training is mine. In this video, I'm going to talk about double-blind searches. So what is a double-blind search? Because it's one of the most important phases that new dog trainers have to go through, that teaches or trains detector dogs or tracking dogs, search and rescue dogs. A double-blind search is where the dog team, the dog handler, has no idea where the items are that he has to search for, be it narcotics or explosive. He has no idea where the victim is hiding for search and rescue, and he has no idea which way the tracks go that he's expected to follow. In addition to that, the people that laid the tracks, the people that hid the various finds that you have to find, are nowhere near you. They're not in the same room, they're not in the same area. You can't see them, your dog can't see them. That's a double-blind search, and that needs to be an integral part of the last phase of training for new dog teams. Handlers that consistently hide their own finds, that consistently go out and lay their own tracks, and ignore double-blind searches will never become effective dog teams. They are only kidding themselves. So implementing a double-blind search is important, but it has to be done at the right time in a training program. People that don't have an instructor that you can get help with, you just can't go out and have someone lay a track and then you have to take an untrained dog and go out and find where that person went. If you're lucky, you might find them, but you're going to walk in a lot of circles before you do that. And the same thing goes for wanting to train a narcotics dog and you're in a small department someplace that won't spend the money to get good instruction. You're going to develop a lot of bad habits. So I'm going to say there is a time to start double-blind searches. I'm going to talk about exactly when that is in this video. So obviously the first phase of training a detector dog is to go through the work that we teach the dog what odor we want the dog to look for. And I'm not going to talk about this in this talk. That can be a whole lecture in and of itself. That's in phase one. Once the dog understands the odor that it has to find, then it has to go through phase two. And in phase two, this is where it is okay to have someone lay a track for you. It is okay for someone to hide all your finds, and it is okay for that person to go with you when you run the tracks or when you go through and you do your search, because you're going to need help. The thing that new dog trainers need to wrap their mind around is that the purpose of phase two, after the dog has identified the odors he's supposed to be finding, the purpose of phase two is for the dog handler to recognize behavior changes in his dog for different scenarios. And those scenarios are, for example, and I've got them written down to remind myself, is how does my dog react when he gets into odor? So we're going through a narcotics search or an explosive search. We want to be able to notice the behavior change in our dog as soon as he gets into the odor cone. Does his tail start to really wag fast? Can you hear his nose? Some dogs smell so loud that you can hear them where they're searching, they get into an odor cone, and all of a sudden you hear. Not all dogs do that. Not all dogs do the same thing in all of these questions I'm going to talk about. That's why it's important. We can't tell you a dog's going to do this, this, and this when it loses a track. A dog's going to do this, this, and this when it gets into an odor cone. The next thing is, how can we tell when our dog is actively working an odor cone? It's one thing for a dog to hit an odor cone. He's going to give us a behavior change. What does the dog do when he works that odor cone to the source? The dogs act differently. And you have to know that so you can recognize it in a blind search or in a real search. What does the dog do when it's faced with a distraction? What does he do if you have a narcotics dog or an explosives dog and you have to do a search warrant on a house and there's a dog next door that's running up and down the fence? Does distract your dog completely? What does your dog do if he's on a search in a building and a cat jumps out of there and runs away? Most of the time, the dog's going to smell that cat before he goes. Not all the time, but you have two different types of distractions there. Number four, how does your dog act when he's getting really close to odor? You know, your dog's going to be doing a search. He's in an odor cone. You have to recognize when he hits the odor cone. You have to recognize when he's following the odor cone. Sometimes these are short little distances. Sometimes they're long distances. You have to know when your dog is close to source. What is it? Some dogs, again, tails go crazy. You can hear them sniffing harder. They will test the edges of the odor cone until they get down as close as they can get to it. The fifth one is, how do you know when your dog has lost odor? Some dogs are masters at convincing a handler that they have lost the track. They'll keep their nose down and they'll just keep right on going on over there, and there's not odor anywhere over there. But the dog knows that something's going to happen, or something has happened in the past when they've lost odor and they didn't get help from their handler. So you need to know that. I'll give you an example here of when I went up to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Dog School in the early 1990s and learned that part of the training program there is that when a dog overshoots a corner, they don't let that dog run 100 yards past a corner. During training, they recognize when the dog's lost track. He'll pick his head up. Every dog, again, is a little bit different, but they only let the dog go a leash length past a corner. And this is something that they learn when they've got the instructor or the helper behind them. And they learn it over time and over hundreds of tracks. I need to re-emphasize here that every single dog is different. And that's why it's so important in phase 2 of tracking. That needs to be the focus of phase 2 of tracking. The focus should not be to go out and find every hide in a room. The focus shouldn't be to go out and track to the very end. The focus of phase 2 is for the dog handler to learn the behavior changes that his dog offers when it goes through these 4 or 5 different scenarios that I just got through talking about. That has to be the focus. The best way to do it, though, is to have somebody film your training. If you have somebody that'll film your training, then go back and watch that training in slow motion. Watch it again and again and again. Make notes on it. Do it as soon as you can after you're done with it. Because if you wait to do it tonight, you're not going to remember everything. Sit down when you're done, have your manual there, draw the search out, draw the track out, put the wind direction, whatever, put notes in there on any distractions in the environment, and then when you go back and watch it in slow motion, look for the behavior changes in your dog and write them down. By writing them down, by the end of your training program, you're going to have a list of a lot of different things on that dog. Try and organize the list, get it clear in your own mind. It's going to be easier for you. It is important that you learn to listen to your dog tracking. It's important to watch his ears, watch his tail, watch the intensity of the work that he's doing. See if there's changes in those things. Watch his overall attitude towards working. That's how you're going to become a better dog trainer. Something else I'll talk about here too, there's nothing wrong, and I'll use the example of a track, but it can apply just as easily towards a detector dog search. There's nothing wrong if, let's say my dog has a problem on a corner where I have to help him get around and find the corner. There's nothing wrong with taking him off the track over here when he's past the corner, taking him back 30, 40 yards, 50 yards back down the track and ask him to track again. And the second time he does it, it's going to be easier. And then if you have to do it again, there's nothing wrong with doing it 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Every time the dog does it, he's going to gain experience. Every time he's going to gain more confidence in that corner. Just remember, our goal is not to finish a training track. Our goal is not to go into a room and find every single find in the room. In this phase, we want to learn what our dog is doing and watch him all the time. We want to recognize behavior changes. Now, as the dog gets better, you're going to need less and less and less help as you go through a track or as you go through a room and the instructor or your helper is right behind you. When you can complete 8 out of 10 tracks, 8 out of 10 searches with no help at all from the person that did it, that's the time to start double-blind searches. That's phase 3 of your tracking. So phase 1 is teach the odor. Phase 2 is teach the handler. Phase 3 is let that handler go out there and dangle on the end of a rope, and he has no idea where any of this stuff is, and he has to figure it out. He and his dog that are pretty well trained by this. By the time you get to that, you're going to have a lot of searches under your belt. But a double-blind search is where you're going to get confidence in your dog's ability. A double-blind search is where you're going to know when your dog is in odor. A double-blind search is you're going to know pretty surely that you haven't missed anything in the area you're working on. I do need to say too that if somebody questions whether the helper or the instructor should be in the same room or even in the same field, if you don't know what a clever Hans syndrome is, go to Google, look up Clever Hans. It's about a guy back in the early 1900s that trained his horse to count. And the horse never learned to count, but the horse was very astute at reading behavior changes in the people that were around him. And so are dogs. We talk all day long to our dogs, and they don't understand 99.9% of the stuff we tell them, but they are experts, absolute experts at reading body language on us. Our job is to be able to read body language on our dogs, and that's phase 2 of training. But when you get to that point, you're dealing with a genius over here that can read people. You're dealing with a dog that has a triple PhD in reading human being behavior. So now you have to learn this animal's behavior. So there's a difference there. That dog, don't kid yourself, if you've got somebody that's laid your track right there with you, that dog's going to read it. If you have somebody with you that's laid the searches over there and you're doing a search and the dog blows by a search and that guy's going to be doing this or he's going to be doing this or he's going to be doing this, don't kid yourself that that dog's not eventually going to pick up on that kind of behavior. They're going to do it. That's why don't have anybody with you when you do a double-blind search. It has to be like that. If you want to become a good dog trainer, if you want to become a good dog handler, you're going to have to learn how to use double-blind searches. You're going to have to learn how to go through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of training. And you'll love it if you learn to do it right. It's fun if you go out there and you have no idea where the fines are, you have no idea where the track is, and your dog nails it. To me, there's nothing better than that.